So good morning, I'm Brenna Berman. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit in Chicago called the City Tech Collaborative, where we bring together nonprofits, corporations, and academic organizations to do joint solution innovation. And that's actually what we're here to talk about today, how you need to bring collaboratives together to solve entrenched urban problems. And we couldn't have a more august panel to help us talk about that. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I simply couldn't do it justice. And Mayor Strange, I'd actually like you to go first. Tell us a little bit about who you are, the work that you do, and what's going on and what's exciting in your neck of the woods.
Great, thanks. Delighted to be a part of this opportunity to be with people that really know what they're doing. As a mayor, you get to do a lot of things. I'm Todd Strange. I am the mayor of Montgomery, Alabama. We are the capital city of the great state. I'm on my third term, and I'm not seeking re-election, so there are a lot of people that want my position. But we've been on an adventure in Smart City and Cyber City or Gig City, or ever how you want to talk about it, for about 5 or 6 years, leading us to, at the end of the day, from a Citizenville book that we all studied, where we did the open data portal with Socrata, to an internet exchange that we started, which is the only one in the state and only one of several in the 5 in the southeast. But it's led us to use technology and smart initiatives to do the work of the city, whether it be in sanitation, whether it be in our street maintenance, whether it be in our law enforcement, public safety, Star Watch. There's a myriad of things. We'll talk about it, but if we didn't have partnerships, if we didn't have a chamber, if we didn't have a county commission, if we didn't have the military, even state government, one of the smartest things that we did was we married IT for the city and the county. And so it's a seamless situation. So we were able to do all that. And I'm delighted to hear other things, and we can talk specifically about how we've used this collaboration, how we've used this technology to solve some of our issues, being a lot more efficient in the city administration, particularly in those public work services.
Great. So Denise, how are things going in South Bend, besides the most exciting news about what your mayor is up to?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Lynn Riedl. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of South Bend, Indiana. Before I moved to South Bend, Indiana, I used to work at the City Tech Collaborative with Brenna, so this is a nice reunion. So I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, and I'm the head of the Department of Innovation and Technology. So our department in city government does everything from bread and butter internal IT work, making sure everyone has a computer, our networks are running, to data and performance management, to strategic partnerships around technology in the region. So it's a really interesting portfolio to manage. We have a great team. There's a lot of momentum and innovation happening in the city. The city government is a big part of it, but there are lots of other stakeholders that are partnering with us on exciting projects, and so I'm excited to talk about a few today.
Great. And then, Neil, you don't work for a single city, you work with many cities.
Many cities as an urban policy professor at New York University, and I have a joint appointment at the Wagner School of Public Service and the relatively new school, the Center for Urban Science and Progress, which is another way of saying I teach in a school of government and a school of urban science. And the whole point today is to talk about collaboration, and academia is not so good at that. So why am I in 2 different schools when urban science and government should be thought of together? So that's a lot of what I do actually in my role, is work on collaboration, so work with mayors around the country. And the project I'm most excited about right now is a relatively new effort called the Mayor's Smart Cities Institute. So we're going to get you to come, Mr. Mayor. And it's a partnership between New York University and the U.S. Conference of Mayors, with Verizon as a prime sponsor. And the premise for this essentially data technology school for cities is that no one really knows exactly what smart cities is, right? That's kind of why we're here. We're trying to make sense of it. And this is an opportunity for mayors to learn together with experts and facilitators from around the country. And it's gone really well. So we're going to be reaching out to more mayors and talking about what we're finding in the future. The other effort I'm involved in is I'm working with deans from schools of public administration around the country to really remake curriculum in this space, because we haven't done that in 50 years. So as much as government is trying to play catch up on data and technology, so are universities. And what's exciting about that effort is we're working directly with city governments to see what they need. And what we're hearing again and again is our schools, our universities are not producing the right skills, we're not customizing enough, and we're too darn expensive. Right, for those that want to go into public service. And so we're trying to address that at many schools around the country, and I'm particularly excited. I'm working as an advisor to Tulane University in New Orleans. We're creating the first new public administration program in about 20 years. And it's going to be entirely online, affordable, and very skill-based with a focus on data and technology.
So we're already seeing across what all four of us do this trend of collaboration. And I know where my own company came from was this philosophy that the problems cities are facing, whether they're the aging infrastructure problem, the results of climate change, that there's no one person that can solve that problem, that it really requires a team of people with differing perspectives and skill sets, and you need collaboration to make that team function. So I thought it might be helpful to share some examples of where each of you have had to build a collaborative team to solve a particular problem in your city. So Denise, could you share one or two of those examples?
Absolutely. So one really interesting example happening in South Bend is our work around the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge. And so South Bend was one of the cities selected by Bloomberg Philanthropies. We won $1 million to test a new model around transportation as a benefit. So when you think about a mid-sized city like South Bend, we don't have the density or the infrastructure really in place to have a robust public transit system. And, you know, just because we actually have relatively high car ownership in the city of South Bend and relatively low traffic, although people in South Bend would contest that, it's all relative. I used to live in Chicago, Boston, and DC, so I think it's peachy keen, but in South Bend we have relatively high car ownership. That just doesn't mean that we have transportation security necessarily. So a lot of the data we have on car ownership is per household, and it speaks nothing to the quality of the vehicle that people have, the reliability, or who in that household is sharing vehicles. And so we know, especially for hourly wage workers, this is a big boundary to getting them to work. Often, we in South Bend like to call our city the beta city. You know, and that's just something that we discuss, not because we necessarily want to embrace technology to embrace technology. It actually is broader than that. We really just love to test new solutions to problems that no one institution can solve. And sometimes it involves data and technology. This particular transportation challenge that we are modeling a solution for the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge involves us partnering with local employers, Notre Dame, our health system, our own parks and recreation system in South Bend, to go to those large employers that have hourly wage workers and then pilot this new solution with them. So helping them see the ROI on getting people to work on time, reducing transportation insecurity. We've seen through the one pilot we ran in 2018, we saw a reduction in tardies, we saw an increase in overall satisfaction with the employees, and we also saw an increase in productivity. So the employers that we've been partnering with on this solution, they've really seen the value of it, and we've started to plan and rerun more iterations of the solution, and we're going to be perfecting it over time. And so that's one interesting example of how a national philanthropy, a city government, local employers got together and are currently in progress around building, hopefully, a sustainable model around how this could look in a mid-sized city.
Mayor?
Thank you. Just to do a personal with Neil, I have the privilege of being the chairman of the board of a small liberal arts school, and I've been trying to push this public administration, and we always talk about our internet exchange and how education could be using that. We have a lot of pilot programs we talked about in the pre-conference call, You know, we're kind of a city of first. We were the first in public transportation with the electric streetcar. We were the first in the civil aviation flying school. We were the first in open heart surgery. We love to be first. There's some pride in being first. So we do a lot of pilots. Good news is most of those pilots have worked. If they don't work, it's, well, I'm sorry, you know, that didn't work. What did we learn from it? Thomas Edison tried thousands and thousands of things before he ever found the filament. So this collaboration and partnership takes on a myriad of things. What I wanted to suggest that we've done just recently in our own pilot, we're a 200-year-old city come December. Anytime you get a city of any age, you're going to have some areas of that community there's going to be some dilapidation, and it's hard to keep up with. And I'll go ahead and throw the state under the bus because we're the capital city. There's about 1,100 dwellings in our city that are actually under state control, and they could care less whether they've got weeds or broken windows or any of those things. So we have to deal with that. Well, you can ride around our city and you can eyeball all of this dilapidation and all the abatements that you need, but that's a lot of manpower and it takes you a lot of time. So we were able, through some what we call near millennials, a 45-year-old that's working with our other young people to develop an in-house system where we take all of the records that are available to us, whether it be utility records, whether it be tax records, and we can narrow down through filters from about 20,000 potentials to about 1,100 that don't have power, that didn't pay their taxes. And so now we can eyeball 1,100 a lot easier than we can 20,000. So now in that eyeball, there are about 400 that we can absolutely put into play. And if you do 150 teardowns a year, which is going to cost you $500,000 to $600,000 over a 3-year period of time, you can in fact address that dilapidation. Now, obviously, in that 3-year period of time, more are coming on, but that's effort, and that's a really good example of through technology, through smart initiative, with collaboration with all of the elements that are there to solve a real live issue that all cities are facing.
That's great. So Neil, is this a trend that you're seeing across other cities?
So trend is an interesting way to think about collaboration in cities because as someone that works with cities and studies cities, the thing you realize is cities are the most collaborative level of government, bar none, right? States and the federal government regulate, pass laws, cities get things done, and that's always been the case. And that's partly because anybody who looks at cities, and even some mayors when they first enter City Hall, learn the first rule about municipal government, which is how limited they are. And I'm thinking about what you just said, Mayor Strange, about state government. The main reason they're so limited is cities are creatures of the state, period, full stop. And that's something that's lost on many city observers that think all this wondrous growth is happening. There's all this movement back downtown, all of which is true. But cities themselves and local government leaders are incredibly limited in terms of taxing authority, economic development policy, as we saw in Charlotte, North Carolina a few years ago, even to have multi-gendered bathrooms or to ban plastic bags in San Francisco. So local governments and mayors and city managers are wily collaborators. They always look to see who they can work with. And I think there's no better city to make sense of that than in Atlanta. Because I don't know if you know the motto of this city. I'm sure some of you out there do, but it's the city that's too busy to hate, right? This is a city where things get done. And it's actually, this is the one time I'll get academic on us, probably the most influential urban policy book written in the last 40 years by Clarence Stone studied Atlanta. And the theory was on something called regime politics, which essentially meant that cities get things done not through formal boards, but behind the scenes relationships, mainly with the business community, to accomplish their goals, right? And that business community has changed, which we'll talk about, but that's how things happen in cities, and they're great collaborators. Now, in terms of trends, there are two differences that I've noticed in the last 10 or 15 years. One is the role of universities, and the other is data and technology itself, and they're kind of connected. So universities, because the traditional business community that cities and mayors have been so accustomed to working with are more difficult to work with because of global capitalism, right? And their satellite offices, headquarters are all over the world. So it's difficult to form those regimes with the business community that you had before. And who's left are the anchor institutions, the hospitals, the medical centers, and universities. And what's great is they're better partners now. And a lot of it is because of data and technology. Universities are just overwhelmed, excited, and committed to the vast amounts of data and computing power that we have. So at my university, at New York University, we formed the first official MOU with local government to create the Center for Urban Science and Progress, where we promised, and it's in a contract, and we're held accountable to it 4 times a year with local government to help manage and store the data as a bit of a data warehouse in New York. And in Chicago, we've talked about the University of Chicago has a whole program called Urban Labs, where in areas of education and criminal justice, there's a real commitment to work with local government around data and technology issues. And then, of course, there's data and technology itself and the types of businesses in this space. So you have companies like Uber and Lyft that are complementing traditional public transit and working with local officials to make those connections. And I think there's so many opportunities that cities are also taking advantage of in the startup community with entrepreneurs. So you see this a lot with the Internet of Things, where companies will, maybe not for free or pro bono, but at a very low rate, try and break into the market and offer to dive into sewers and put sensors in so that cities can monitor things like combined sewer overflow. So a lot of exciting opportunities to rethink collaboration in 2019 and beyond.
If I may just, he talked in the academia side of the equation. Let me give you the practical side. Everything he has just talked about, we're absolutely having a privilege of doing. Whether we have a great statewide, actually it's worldwide institution, Troy University. It came back downtown before it was cool to come back downtown. Last 15 years, we've gone from about a couple of hundred residential units to approaching 1,500. We've come from 2 downtown hotels to 6, and we've got two more coming. We partnered with Alabama Power Company, which is part of the Southern Company, for a living lab along our Commerce Street. And if it wasn't for that partnership between the Chamber of Commerce and a 3-star general that kicked us in the behind, because we were sitting right at the doorstep of Air University and a complex that did a ton of desktop publishing, purchasing $40 billion worth. And we had that talent right there, and we were just oblivious to it. But for the 5-6 years, we've kind of been moving in a direction like that. One of our things, in addition to the collaboration I talked about, to do the environmental things, now we've got artificial intelligence riding our streets and telling us what streets in a 0 to 5 rating need to be paved. We've got artificial intelligence on our sanitation trucks that are optimizing our routes. And if we don't have to have 60 routes, but if we have to have 50 routes, that's about a $6 million savings right there. And so the collaboration is absolutely paramount. You cannot do this on your own. If you can get the state to give you some money, which we did, we got $6 million about 8 years ago to prime the pump in downtown redevelopment. That $6 million paved some streets, it bought some properties, allowed us to put some RFPs out. We're in the $120, $130 million private sector range. And we don't have to worry about downtown redevelopment now. The private sector is taking us now. There are some other areas that we've got to get accomplished, and we're going to use the exact same principle as we go into these other areas.
So what are some of the challenges of getting these collaborations off the ground? Like, they're clearly worth it. I don't think any of us would argue that it's not worth the work, but it's not easy. So what are some of the things that you have to get, some of the bumps you need to get over to get these collaborations off the ground, and how did you do that?
First of all, you got to have the relationships. You got to have the trust.
Yep.
Fear of failure.
Right.
Fear of expending X number of dollars and it doesn't work.
How do you get people to take that risk with you?
Success. Mm-hmm. Those individuals that want to be a part of moving, particularly our city, forward, are willing to step up. Those that aren't, we try to bring them along, and if we can bring them along, great. but somebody has to take the lead. And the collaboration piece, the partnership piece is great and wonderful. But for me personally, somebody's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to wake up every morning. And, it could be the mayor, but we got lots of other things to do. I have a saying that if that was the only thing that I had to do today, I could get that done. But there's so many myriads of things. You do have to run a 205,000 person city. You got to pick the garbage up. You got to pave. You got to make sure, you have police and fire protection. So it's always about finding somebody. And we've been very blessed to have a great Chamber of Commerce. Lou Alachi is here with us this morning. He is in charge of both city and county IT. We married those two organizations together about 6 years ago, and so it's seamless. What that means is if we got $1 million expenditure, that means they got 400,000 of it, we got 600,000. That's the kind of collaboration. So I would just say that you know who your partners are, you know who you can trust to get it done, and success breeds success. And frankly, we've had some really good success over the last few years, and we're looking forward to the future because these young people that are out there, and what I do, or what we do at the senior level is we share these visions, share these ideas. We don't let money get in the way of the vision. We let it get in the way of the timing. But then we get the resources, we get the heck out of the way, and we enjoy the follow-up that comes. So that would be my comment.
Those are great ideas. So Denise, what about you? What are some of the hurdles and how did you get over them?
So one challenge really is just creating shared understanding and a shared language around the problem that these vastly different stakeholders are trying to solve together. And so I know this is something you think about a lot at City Tech, obviously, as you bring people together and scope out pilots. In South Bend, one really interesting example is we do, through our South Bend Fire Department, we do drone work, not only understanding the fire, the scene of the fire as we're fighting a fire, but for river rescue. We actually do trainings for river rescue for cities all around the country. They come to St. Joseph County in South Bend, and they do river rescue, and we have drone work that's a part of that. And so we've been collaborating with Notre Dame. We have an academic in the Wireless Institute there that's been a great partner who thinks about the infrastructure required in cities to make this happen. Our fire chief is very passionate about this. It's a public safety issue for him. It's an opportunity for him. We have an academic at Notre Dame that is an expert in drones and drone software management. And bringing all these people together and actually having them talk about the opportunity and the problem in the same way is actually a big challenge. And I had an aha moment just the other week where we had reunited and we were talking about the project that we were working on and ways that we could move forward together and collaborate. And during this meeting, we had an external stakeholder who was asking questions, and I remember Nick Lanneman from Notre Dame, who's our wireless guy, he chimed in, and then he started talking about the risks on the city side and the need to be really thoughtful about privacy policies and how we would roll out a program and how we would scale something. And I just had this lovely, warm and fuzzy collaborative moment because I realized we've been working together for a while and we've reached that point almost organically that he understood the shared language of this project. And not only that, but he understood the risks and the motivations on the city side the way that I now understood on his side as well. And so I think that reaching that point organically is one way to do that. You can work with people for years, or you can do that in more formal ways that different collaboration and ecosystem partners have actually set up.
That's great. Leo?
So just at a high level, there are two dynamics, and you just mentioned a few that I think are critical, and I think I'm going to mention a couple that maybe we haven't talked about. One, and they're both kind of a double-edged sword, so they could be opportunities. So one is citizens themselves, right? So data and technology allows us to better connect to citizens in ways we never could have before, whether those be kiosks where citizens can register their thoughts, but also more their concrete suggestions and get out of this dynamic of just having a town hall meeting where citizens are often pretty aggressive and antagonistic. Data and technology allows ways to better connect directly to citizens in a substantive way, but it's also a challenge, right? Because being in City Hall has always been a bit of a fishbowl environment, and the media could always write about what you're doing or do a long piece that is very critical, and now citizens can just pick up their phone and they can hit Instagram or Twitter or what have you and remark on something that they're not happy with, and then that can catch fire. And I've seen this dynamic lead to a lot of cautiousness. And cities being more conservative about some collaborations that they might want to negotiate because there is this feeling that citizens at any moment can jump on it. The other dynamic is what I think of as the orientation amongst the private sector in data and technology and smart cities to ask for forgiveness, not permission. And this goes to this dichotomy between the physical and the digital realm, which are starting to blend together in some wondrous but also some very challenging ways. And in the physical realm, you do have guardrails, literally, right? And you do have stop signs. So there's some sense of the role and the regulations and the authority that cities and local governments have. You don't have that in the digital realm. It's really the Wild West. I mean, this is a big focal point of debates within Congress right now, but it's also something that's playing out in cities. And again, there's nowhere you could better see this than right here in Atlanta, where you walk out, and I've actually been running around the different neighborhoods, and whether it's right here downtown, on the Beltline, in really all the neighborhoods that I've seen, you have what I call scooter debris. Or what my colleague, Story Bellows, calls scooter detritus, right? These scooters are everywhere, and I've had so many mayors, actually, when we have smart city convenings, we usually create 10 minutes at the beginning for mayors to vent about scooters, where they walk out of City Hall, and they trip over these things, and they say, where did this come from? How did this show up on my doorstep? And then you have to work backwards to think about, not necessarily regulation, but how is it that you address these vehicles that are on your streets? And again, the opportunity here is, given that it's the Wild West, and there are so many opportunities, how can the public sector, how can the private sector, how can other actors like intermediaries and institutions of higher learning come together and define a digital realm in a way that we actually improve the physical realm?
If I may talk about scooters.
See, we should have done it at the beginning, just like Neil said. No, please,
well, I'm
go
not
ahead.
going to vent. We just did bike share. We have authority from the legislature, Huntsville, Alabama, and Montgomery, the only two cities that have the legislative authority to do scooters in the state of Alabama. Got that through the legislature. The guy that I tapped to, remember, always somebody got to get in charge.
Somebody's gotta be
tapped to go and look at this. He went to Knoxville, Tennessee. He rented one. He checked it out. He fell off and broke his arm. And so when he came back, he said, well, I'm still sold. And I said, we're not doing scooters. I have had too many bad situations. I was in Europe and France, and they're everywhere, worse than what you see here. And you were tripping over, and they're just ugly and insightful. And until somebody else figures it out, we're just going to hang back and wait and let somebody else do that. Going back to the private citizen, we actually got into this whole Smart City initiative through an individual who gave me the book, Citizenville. And I gave it to our cabinet. We read it all. Some of the younger people decided, well, let's go this open data side of the equation. And so they brought Savio Diaz is here. He's one of the smart guys. And he developed this program where we get to have this open data, all the checkbooks, and you see in streets that are going to be paved, and crime where it happened, and fires where it happened, all kind of stuff. But they brought it over to me and said, first thing we want to do is we want to put everybody's salary, 2,500 employees, on the open data. And they said, they wanted to make sure I was okay with it. Well, I'm looking at the top, and in the first 20 names, I don't even see my name. Now I'm 28 or 29 paid in the city, which is no big deal because these guys are smarter than I am, and a lot of women that are there as well. And so I don't care. But that was our first initiative into that. And then that same citizen put a group together in a collaborative fashion and did something in public transportation to put some apps together for local use to know where the bus is, when it's going to be there. And if you think about the history of Montgomery, Alabama, first boycott, December of 1955, we're pretty significant from a standpoint of public transportation. So it is about the citizen. It is about the collaboration. I just got call last week and what I thought about Jacksonville, Florida. Our editor of the newspaper went down and saw that they are putting internet mail, emails into the public arena, just between city department heads, the mayor here and the mayor there, talking about ideas, talking about, what would you think? That's pretty dumb, and all due respect. And they're finding out now that that is problematic. So open data, open communication, transparency is wonderful, but sometimes government is like sausage. You gotta make sausage sometimes behind the door, and then the product that comes out there, you can start talking about that. Now, I understand that open data is the watchword in today's environment. We're trying to do everything. First guy called and said, why are we going backwards? We're not going backwards. We're just trying to be smart about stuff and get things that don't get in the way of some progress.
So we have just a little bit of time, and I think I'd like to ask each of you, and I will let you guys decide who wants to go first, to tell us what you're most excited about seeing either your own city or just cities in general accomplish through collaboration in the next 2 to 5 years. And those are very different horizons. So tell me if you're picking 2 or 5 years.
Great, well, thank you. So I'll start, and actually this is quite quicker than the 2 to 5 year time horizon, but one thing immediately that I'm looking forward to is South Bend is part of a working group of cities that are kind of co-developing new data sharing and privacy policies. And so we actually will be working on that next week at the Metro Lab Summit with those cities, and so I'm very excited. My office has a joke that we like to be the second city that does anything, just so that you can avoid some of the worst mishaps. But at the same time, though that is the dream, we get enormous value out of collaborating with other cities, learning with other cities, being a part of these formal collaborations. But then also just calling one another and exchanging notes is enormously helpful. So that's what I'm most excited for immediately, those data sharing policies that we're co-developing at Metro Lab. And just in the future too, I think other things that we're looking towards in Indiana, I certainly, there's a lot of work to be done in South Bend on open data. Coming from Chicago, it's a totally different level, completely different place. And so I would love to, as a mid-sized city and as a city where we are, with the assets that we have, take 10 steps forward on that in particular and learn from other cities as we do it.
I'll leave Neil about 2 minutes to wrap up from his perspective. The next 2 to 3 years, it's unlimited where we can go. Just your mind is going to take us in so many different directions. And as I said earlier, let the young people that can deal with this, let them at it, get them some resources. But the one area that I'm most excited about is in public safety and law enforcement. Because while it is Big Brother, in today's environment, there's so many people out there that just don't care about life, and they are doing things. And so what we've done is we've been able to put together, through our own innovation, our own technology, Star Watch, where we can link a myriad of cameras, both public and private, assuming we get their permission, and we can see in our center what's going on in our city. We can know that there's a rally going to happen, and we can have eyes in the sky. If something happened in a particular location, we can have eyes in the sky in a minute, and we can find the car and get it done. That's going to be a virtual patrol. Take 50 to 70 officers don't take them off the street, but it gives the capability of 1 or 2. We've got 5,000 cameras now. We're following Mobile in this. They've got about 10 cameras, so we're just now beginning for the last year or so. But that in public safety, I think, is the future. And you see this in a lot of the bigger cities, facial recognition, license plate recognition, and things like that. And we're moving in that direction. Neil, you got 2 minutes.
You got me 20 seconds, but I think I can do it.
I think you can.
I might
Let's
take
go.
liberties, yeah. So criminal justice, public safety, huge. I'm really excited about what can happen around issues of mobility. And so we talked about scooters, but there's also so much attention rightly being paid to autonomous vehicles. Of course, there are still conversations, fights, battles around Ubers and ride shares and everything else. And one of the most exciting things I've seen is the creation of a new open source foundation called the Open Mobility Foundation, which is being led by transportation commissioners of the largest cities in the country. So Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Boston, and others are joining all the time. And they're coming together to define with the private sector, and a number of the companies, I believe Bird and Lime and others are involved, to jointly come together around what the data should be and how it should be used and utilized. And so rather than having separate apps and rather than having separate code, to come together to have a common platform to absorb the data, analyze it, and actually obtain new goals that cities can work on together with the private sector around sustainability, public safety and not breaking one's arm out there, and equity issues. So I would look out for the Open Mobility Foundation.
Great. Please join me in thanking our three great panelists for all the information they shared. Thank you.